All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Happy Tuesday. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video. If you're on a smaller screen, if you're on a larger screen, it should be to the right of the video. So let's see what we got here already. It looks like we already got several questions in there. So good to see. All right. So Dan A says, "Hey Q, how do I get the toe to turn over during or after impact? I'm doing the move and keeping the face square during the downswing, but somehow the face won't roll over after impact. I'm not trying to hold it during impact, but that's just what happens with the face facing up the sky after impact. Gotta let the arms roll over each other. So let the natural momentum of the club kind of roll over the arms, right? And really, it's okay to have the face kind of like this. There are lots of players like Jordan Spieth, for example, Brooks Koepka. There's a lot of players that have kind of more. You would almost call it more like a square release, where the club's staying very very square even after impact. And then there are lots of players. Most players, I would say, have more of kind of a rolled release, where after impact that toe kind of rolls over and that trail arm kind of rolls over the lead arm. So neither one of them are bad or good, right? It's really just comes down to what do you do naturally. So if you naturally kind of keep that face square through contact, that's a completely fine thing to do. So, but if you want to get the face rolling over more, if you're leaving the face open, it may be beneficial for you to feel like the face is rolling over more. So I feel kind of like the arms are rolling over each other, right? So you're squaring up the face, and then the arms kind of roll over each other as you're coming through contact. A good thing that I like to have players feel is to feel like they're releasing the club up a wall, right? So if you imagine I got the wall in front of me here, and I'm coming in, I'm releasing that club up the wall. You can see when I do that, if you imagine there's a wall right here, right? If I'm coming in and I'm releasing it up the wall, you can see how that toe rolls over when I do that. Now, you wouldn't literally be hitting the ball and then going like this, but that's a good feeling for a lot of players to have, especially players who are releasing the club early and kind of releasing the club into the wall. So kind of going like this too much, right? So they're coming into contact early, releasing, and they're getting like this. If we get the feeling of kind of releasing up the wall, it makes it a lot easier to get that shaft length, get that face more stable as you're coming through contact. So, but I wouldn't always look at things that you're swinging and think that they're necessarily good or bad, right? It's really comes down to the fundamentals that we talk about in the Toss Speed Golf system. Those are the main things. Those are the things that we definitely want to do. And then Danny says, to follow up on that question, I just finished level 2 of the stable fluid spine. Should I move on to other parts of the Toss Speed Golf system or just finish level 3 and stable fluid spine, given my situation? I've only finished the first 2 levels of the stable fluid spine and haven't touched the other areas of the Toss Speed Golf system. Thanks a ton, man. Yeah, so it's really a personal preference. There's 2 ways to work through the system. You can do it the way that you've kind of started out doing, where you stayed in the stable fluid spine, you've done level 1, level 2, and then now you're ready to move on to level 3. And then once you do that, you can go to the power turn, level 1, level 2, level 3. Or what you can do is you can do stable fluid spine level 1, and then you go to the power turn, do the level 1 there, and then go onto the lag course, do the level 1 there. So you can go through the course in either one of those ways. Right now, I would just say that each course is a prerequisite for the next one, right? So in order to do level 1 of the power turn, you need to be doing level 1 of the stable fluid spine, right? In order to do level 2 of the stable fluid spine, you need to be doing level 1 of the stable fluid spine, right? So what you don't want to do, the way that you don't want to work through the system, and this is where I think a lot of people get off, is they'll maybe do level 1 of the stable fluid spine, and then they'll jump to like the lag course, right? Well, you haven't, unless you already have a really good power turn, you're already doing the things that we talk about doing in the power turn, then you need to go in and do the power turn, at least the level 1 first before you move on to the lag course. So 2 ways to work through it. You can do it either way. It's completely up to you. I tell students generally, if it were me, going through the system, I would like to do all the level ones and then do all the level twos. Then I'll do all the level threes because then you get a little bit of variety. Like, okay, I've worked on the stable fluid spine for a month. I'm going to take a break from the stable fluid spine. Let me go work on the shoulder turn a little bit, the power turn. Then I'll do in the level one there. And then, hey, I've worked on the level one for another month or so, right? I've gotten to where the power turn level one looks good. Now let me work on my lag a little bit. So that's the way I would go through it. But if you want to stick in one section and go through all the level ones, level twos, level threes, then that's completely fine too. There's two ways to go about it. But I don't recommend mixing and matching and going because you're going to end up spreading yourself really thin. It's going to be difficult to make much progress. All right, so let's keep going here. So Vincent L says, for years, I have been told not to hit at the ball, to move the body first, then the hands and the club late. So not using the arms actively, they just follow. I am sure it is not a bad idea, but would I not get better distance if I was also using the arms more actively, consciously? I'm struggling to understand the relationship body versus arm. So yeah, you're exactly right. We want to use both, but what we want to do is we want to create momentum with the lower body, all right, or with our lower body, then our upper body, then our arms and our wrists, and so on and so forth. So it's all, it's like cracking a whip, right? You're creating momentum with your body, and then you crack that whip. That's the same thing we want to do with the club. So in the power turn course, we actually have a video that's called the Momentum Train video. So I highly recommend you go check out that video, Vincent, where we talk about the creating momentum with the lower body. And basically the visual is, if you imagine, you have a train, and this train's going 60 miles per hour, right? And then you take another train and you put it on top of the roof of that train, and it's also going 60 miles per hour. Then you take another train, you put it on the roof of that train, and it's also going 60 miles per hour, right? So all the trains are going 60 miles per hour, but that train on top is going 180 miles per hour relative to the ground, right? Because it's got momentum created by all the trains that are underneath it, right? So it's only going 60 miles per hour relative to the train that it's on top of, but relative to the tracks, right, it's going 180 miles per hour because the momentum was created. So you can kind of think of, your legs and your lower body as that lower train, right? You can think of your shoulders as that middle train. You can think of your arms and your wrists as that top train, right? So yeah, we want to have a good mixture of both, but it's about the sequence in which you use them, and that's where people have difficulty, is that they kind of turn off their lower body and they throw with all arms. Now, granted, you're going to get most of your speed from your arms. You're going to get 80% probably of your speed from your arms, but to get that extra 20%, we need to have that proper sequencing, right? So that's why people are talking about. So you should be using your arms, but what you probably hear a lot of is more feel, right? Because whether you're consciously doing something, right, that's completely relative. Because one player thinking they're consciously doing something, and another golfer thinking they're consciously doing something, maybe two completely different things, right? So that's why, when people ask me, am I actively doing this? Am I consciously doing this? I don't know, because I'm not you. So you have to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. So if you look on video and you're not doing something and you want to do it, you're going to have to consciously, actively do it in order to change that. And then you're going to have to do it so many times until it becomes second nature, right? And then it becomes automatic, right? So any skill you've ever learned to do works exactly the same way. You learn to walk, right? You probably don't remember learning how to walk, but in the beginning, you failed a lot. You fell over. You're uncoordinated with it. You had to learn how to do it. And you learned by watching your parents or whoever walking around you. And you say, well, if I want to walk around, I need to learn how to do it, right? So you eventually learned how to do it. Typing, I think that's one that a lot of us may have a better chance of remembering doing, but learning how to type, right? At first, you didn't know where all the keys were, right? You had no idea. And then you kind of started figuring it out. Then you figured out how to put your fingers on the keyboard. And then eventually you did it so much, right, that it just becomes automatic. You just think the words and your fingers just do it, right? Well, that's how you have to work through things in your golf swing as well. I'm sure, when you first started playing golf, you thought a lot about the grip, right? And how to put the hands on the club. And then eventually that became automatic. And now you don't think about your grip much at all. You just grip the club and you're thinking about other things, right? Because that's an automatic thing that you're doing because you did enough reps doing it correctly that it's just second nature to you. So that's how you have to work through everything. That's why in the Top Speed Golf system, we're asking you to do a lot of reps because that's what it takes. Like if you just did the reps and focused on it instead of jumping around everywhere, this is what I see everyone do is they're jumping around looking for the shortcut for everything. There is no shortcut. You do the reps, and if you do it consistently on a consistent basis, you will improve, right? So that's what it comes down to. All right, so keep the questions coming here. So Dave G says, "Hi Q, I'm 65 and starting the stable fluid spine drills. I've also watched most of the videos for this section, especially the one dealing with golfers with lack of flexibility. I've always kept my trail leg flexed during the backswing to build torque, but found that when taking swings recently that straightening my leg allows a much easier backswing turn. Watching videos of Snead and Nicholas shows them pretty much straightening their trail leg, but Clay not so much, and he doesn't mention it in the flexibility video, which seems like where he would since it seems to marry nicely to lifting the lead heel. What are your thoughts?" Yes. So the building torque by keeping your leg flexed is really just reducing your range of motion. Is really all you're doing. You're still going to build. You're still going to build that. What you termed as torque by turning your body. You're still going to get the same thing by turning your body. So yes, we should absolutely be straightening out that leg. Now, does it need to come to a completely straight position? No, not usually necessarily. I like to see still a little. I don't like to see it completely hyperextended because then it can kind of get locked and it can be difficult to move it properly in the start of the downswing. So if we can kind of get it to where it's straightening out and not completely hyperextending, that's going to allow you to get that full hip turn. So turning out that trail foot, letting that trail leg straighten some in the backswing, letting that heel come off the ground, letting this knee kick in some, that can help you to get a nice, good turn here that's going to allow you to get, much more speed, because the more turn we can get, typically the more space we can create for the club. And the more space we can create for the club, the more speed we can generate at the bottom, right? And the farther you can hit it. And distance is so important for playing really good golf. If you look at, there's no higher correlation to lower handicap than club head speed and distance. So if you want to be a better player, it really comes down to hitting the ball farther for the most part. So getting that good hip turn makes a big deal. If you keep that leg flexed. And there are some players that do that. So Brooks Koepka, for example, he is a guy that doesn't turn his hips hardly much at all. That trail leg stays pretty flexed. Clay does straighten out his leg some, but he's not real flexible. It does straighten out some. He's not keeping it totally flexed. If you watch, he is turning his hip back. He's just not hyperextending and keep fully straightening out that trail leg, so that way he can move more athletically in the downswing. So, but there are some players that do that. And if you can swing 120 miles an hour and you're very, very flexible, you can get a big turn and swing 120 miles per hour with the flex trail leg, then more power to you. But 99% of people probably can't do that. So most people, especially, amateur players, non-pro players, middle handicap kind of players, they need to let those hips, we need freedom of rotation. Right, we need to be able to turn to be able to get some good speed. So Ted says, "Hi, the more I keep my spine angle and get more forward shaft lane, my swing speeds get slower. Is that common?" Not necessarily. I would just make sure that you're getting a full shoulder turn. Maybe because you're trying to keep your body angled away, and maybe you're shortening up, and um, you're losing some club head speed because of that. That would be my guess. Hard to say without seeing your swing, but that would be my guess. So Gene A says, I recently saw a golf tip that said proper pressing waggle was an up and down movement of the wrists, like Johnny Miller did, rather than in motion back and forth. His reason was this created a better backswing takeaway. I tried it and did it. In fact, get the club better in the backswing position. Do you have any comments, good or bad, on this? What I would say is that, I mean, the waggle is really about getting just getting some movement in the swing, right? So that way you're not coming from a complete standstill. Because if you come from a complete standstill, it's just not an athletic movement, right? So if you're, you want to be moving around some, right? And that waggle allows you to kind of stay loose and feel like you're kind of moving athletically. The way I like to use it, I'm not moving it up and down like what you said. I don't really know. I would have to see the video to really know what they're getting at with that. But when I'm waggling, I'm really just kind of feeling how I want my wrists to kind of work, and how I want to feel this club kind of coming through the ball. And I'm just getting some movement in. And I'm moving my feet back and forth, and then I put the club down, and then I start. Right. So that's kind of how the waggle works. And what I would say is, well, first of all, who cares if it worked for you, right? If there's something that it made you better by doing it, what does it matter what I think? It doesn't matter at all. I could be wrong or right. It does not matter if it helped you to hit a golf ball better. So, yeah, if something that works for you, I wouldn't recommend seeking the approval of anyone. If it works for you, then it works for you. Who am I to say that it's wrong? So Greg N says, being in the northern reaches of the U.S., I currently cannot go outside for my golf. I do have a club speed indicators camera for videos for my swing and the divot board. I can see my swing path and where I'm making contact with the ground thanks to the divot board. I can use the club head speed indicator to improve the speed. I've been working on the move, but have concerns about ball direction. Are there more drills I can do to help understanding that I do not have a TrackMan type tool? So what you can do if you have a net, if you're hitting into a net or something like that, what you can do is you can kind of line it up and like kind of put some tape on the net or put a rope on the net, so that way you can see your start line. That's what I would recommend doing if you don't have something that kind of tells you what's going on there. So Paul W says, hi, I believe you've mentioned it before, but which training instruction do you recommend to eliminate correct hitting the ball thin? Depends on why you're hitting the ball thin, but typically the stop chunking and topping course would be a good place to go, because that's going to help you to get more ball first contact. Typically, if you're hitting thin, it's because the low point of your swing is arriving before the golf ball. So what I mean by that is, if I grab my hula hoop here, she must be afraid I'm going to make her hula hoop. But if I have a ball, right? So if I want to make ball first contact, the low point of my swing, which you can kind of think of as the arc of this hula hoop, right? That low point of my swing needs to be ahead of the golf ball. It needs to be toward the target. For a 7-iron, it's going to be roughly about 4.5 inches for the average tour player. And then as you go down through the bag, it goes up. So it might be, for a wedge, it might be 6 inches in front. And for like a 3-wood, it might be like 2.5 inches in front. Now, keep in mind, this is not where you're contacting the ground. This is where the low point of your swing is. So what that means is that I'm coming in. Imagine this is a 7-iron. I'm coming in, making contact with the golf ball, right? And the ground's going to be ground contact's going to be about at the same time, right? And then I'm going to get into the ground. My club's going to bottom out in the ground, and then it's going to come up out of the ground, right? If I'm someone who's hitting it thin, that means that my club is more than likely grounding out right at the golf ball. So basically, I'm coming in and I'm just picking it off the turf and then coming back up. Right? That's typically what's happening when you're hitting it thin. So the stop chunking and topping course will help you to get that low point more forward, more toward the target. So that's more than likely where you need to go to get that working a little bit better. To get to that stop chunking and topping course, all you have to do is go to the home page by clicking the house icon, and then you can find all the courses on the page there. So Dave G says, hi again. Would you talk about forward press? Is it used as a preset for the golfer's spine angle? Forward press is just something that you may do because it feels more comfortable to do. It's totally personal preference. It's not something that you have to do in your swing. It's something that some players do that feel more comfortable with it than others. So it's not anything that's like a necessity in the golf swing. So I personally like to have my hands a little bit more forward at address, probably than more players. I'm more like this at address. Some players are more like this with the club right in front, kind of in the middle, not a lot of shaft lean. I personally like to have a little bit more press. I don't really push the hands forward very much. I more just kind of push into my trail side and I start the swing. But some players like to kind of push the hands forward and bring it back. Clay does that a little bit. It's really personal preference. It's not like a something you have to do in your swing. It's just something if it helps you hit better golf shots, then go ahead. All right, keep the questions coming here. All right. So what is better, a one-plane swing or a two-plane swing? This is a question I get quite often. But first, what I want to mention is that no matter how many planes you're swinging on, right, one plane or two plane, the top speed golf system fits into both of them. So if you think about probably the most famous, one plane swinger ever that everyone kind of asks me about is a Mo Norman, right? So Mo Norman, is the legend Canadian, great ball striker, quite the personality, right? If you've seen any of his videos on YouTube, and he swings on one plane. Well, if you look at Mo Norman's swing, he's nailing the top speed golf system, right? Spine angle is great. Yeah, it has a great power turn, getting lag. He releases the club out in front. Compression line is good. He's nailing the top speed golf system. Then you look at somebody would be completely on the other end of the spectrum, right? Someone who has a very upright swing. Someone like Bubba Watson, for example. So Bubba Watson, he gets the club way, way up here, and then he brings it down. Or like a John Daly, right? John Daly, very, very upright, high hands kind of swing, and then brings it down, right? Also, both of those guys, Bubba Watson, John Daly, are nailing the top speed golf system, right? They're nailing all the pieces. And you look at anybody that's in between there, like Tiger and Rory, Adam Scott, those guys that have those really beautiful looking swings, they're somewhere in between there, right? They have a two-plane swing essentially, but they're not quite as upright as those other guys I mentioned, like Bubba Watson and John Daly. So there's advantages and then there's disadvantages to both. So if you look at kind of a flat swing or like a one-plane kind of swing where the arms don't really get above the shoulders and you're in this area right here, right? The disadvantage to that is that it's a little bit harder to get speed from there, right? So, the reason for that is that you're not really elevating the arms very much. So you're not creating a lot of space to create speed, right? So the more space you can create, the more you can accelerate the club and create speed in the downswing. So imagine if you were going sledding, right? You want to go the fastest, right? As fast as you can. Well, what you would try to do is you would try to find the tallest, right? And the steepest hill, right? Because that's going to get you going the fastest. If you were wanting to go really slow, you would try to find like a really short and flat kind of area, if you weren't really wanting to go very fast with it. So that's kind of what a one plane swing is. It's kind of a flat kind of swing that you're just not going to be able to create a ton of speed from. It's not to say that you can't play great golf from there. Obviously Mo Norman has, Matt Kuchar has. There's been lots of players out there. Now there won't be as many as the high hands kind of players, but there's plenty of players that have made a great living off of a flat swing. So that would be kind of the disadvantage to that. The advantage of that is you could possibly be more consistent with your ball striking from there, because it takes less, or it doesn't take really anything. You basically just have to keep that club on the same plane, right? So you bring it back, it's flat, and you bring it down into the ball. You kind of keep it on that same plane. You keep it kind of in that shallow kind of position. Now, if you go to more of an upright swing, like a two-plane swing, right, where you have high hands, well, you can imagine what the advantage of that is, right? Those players that I mentioned, John Daly, Bubba Watson, they're long hitters, right? They can create a lot of speed very easily from that high hands position. It's just so much easier to create speed from there. So that's the big advantage. But the disadvantage of that is it's harder to get that club on plane. If I bring those hands up high and I bring them down kind of on the same that same trajectory, right, I'm going to come down really steep and over the top into the ball. So when I get those hands up high, I've got to do a lot more shallowing in the start of the downswing to get that club in a good position when I'm coming down. So that way I can have some good ball flight, right? And that's something that John Daly and Bubba Watson do really well, and anybody else who's got a really vertical swing that's on tour, right? So that's basically the disadvantage. So what I really like is somewhere in between there, right? And really it comes down, everybody's a little bit different, right? If you're someone who's big and strong and has a lot of speed, right, and you swing flat, right, and that's very consistent for you, fantastic. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Stick to that. You can maybe get a little bit more speed if you raise your hand, but if you already have, or if you got your hands up higher, but if you already have plenty of speed, may not be a concern to you. Now, if you're someone who really needs that distance, right, you're someone who's really struggling with speed and distance, you have a very flat swing, recommend getting those hands up, because it's going to be much better for you to hit the ball farther and maybe be just a little bit less accurate than what you were before, right? So that's what I'd be kind of looking at. So somewhere in between there. I'm not saying you got to get way up there like Dustin Johnson or Bubba Watson or John Daly. You don't have to get way up here. But if you get above your shoulder plane, like where Tiger and Rory and Adam Scott are, I think that's a really great position for everybody. It's that good mix. It's a good mix of getting the hands up higher, right? So where you can have that space to create that speed. And it's also a good place where it's easy or somewhat easy to get that club on plane and shallowing out. And so that way you can have the consistency that goes along with it. So that is a two-plane swing. That is what I would prefer to see. That is my preference. But like I said, if I had a student that was swinging flat but had tons of speed anyway, it wouldn't be something that I would be really concerned with. If I had a student that had tons of speed, right, but really struggled with an over-the-top move in the top of the swing, maybe they're swinging 120 miles per hour and they were swinging over the top and they're hitting it everywhere. Well, with that, I might work on, hey, let's just get it a little bit flatter, so that way it just gets a little bit easier to swing from the inside. And most likely they probably wouldn't lose that much speed, but they would gain a ton in being able to control the ball. So it really depends on the player, what's most comfortable for you, what you do naturally. But those would be the things that I'd be looking at. But either way, no matter how many planes you swing on, the top speed golf system still applies to all of it. All right, so let's keep going here. So Todd M says, I suffer from hooding the club at contact. Is it right hand pressure or over the top swing? Hard to say without seeing your swing, but what I would try to feel like is just the face is more open throughout the swing, or weakening the grip. So maybe you have a very strong grip and you're coming in and that club face is really kind of hooding down and getting closed. So weakening the grip, getting the thumbs less on the side of the grip if you do have a really strong grip, and getting them to be more in a neutral position can help quite a bit. So if you imagine, if you're looking down at the grip and you can say 12 o'clock is the top of the grip and 3 o'clock is the side, maybe instead of having your thumbs more toward that 3 o'clock position, you can have the thumbs more in that 130 kind of position. More of a neutral kind of position may help you. The other things I'd be thinking about are maybe feeling like the face is more open. A lot of times when I see people hooding the face at contact is that they're keeping the club face very, very close at the swing. So they're bringing this face back really, really close. And then they're coming down and that face is really kind of hooding down close, right? So feeling like that face is a little bit more open, a little bit more toe up when you're bringing it back. And then when you're bringing it down, feeling like it's more toe up as well can help you to keep that face from closing too much. It can also be over the top. I mean, if you're coming down like this and you're kind of getting on top of the ball, they could certainly be an over the top. So it could be something that you can look at that can be easily diagnosed by just looking at it on video, right? So if you look at a down the line view, so that'd be this kind of view here, kind of where we're looking down the toe line here. If you see the club in your hands kind of going out like this, that's an over the top move. So working on something like the Never Slice Again course can definitely be a really great course for you to get that club working more from the inside. So that way you're not getting on top of it so much. But yeah, the only way for me to know would be able to be just to see your swing for sure. So just as a note on that, if you're interested in working with me, or if anybody else on here is interested in working with me doing some online lessons, I'd love to have the opportunity to work with you. I don't know if I have any spots available at the moment, but if you want to check it out and see what swing reviews are all about, you click the Get a Review link at the top of the page, and then you can see what it's all about. So I don't have any spots available right now. But yeah, if you want to join my waiting list, you'll be notified whenever I open up spots in the future. All right, so keep the questions coming here. We got not quite 30 minutes left here. If you're just jumping on here, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. So if you got a question, go ahead and post them. All right. So Keith S says, would you talk about spinning shots from 100 yards? Yeah, so I would just recommend using the highest lofted wedge if you want to get the most spin possible. Because where spin comes from is friction, right? So we need to have this ball or this club kind of grabbing this ball as much as we possibly can, right? So in order to do that, we have to have loft. So how much speed you have, right? How much club head speed depends on how much loft you can use, right? Not everyone can hit a 60-degree 100 yards, and not everyone can hit a 56-degree 100 yards. But I would just use, if you're looking to get spin, I would use the highest lofted wedge that you can to be able to hit 100 yards, right? So that's the main thing. The other thing is I would have a golf ball that is able to spin, right? If you're playing pinnacles, I wouldn't expect the ball to spin as much. If you want the ball to spin, I would use like a tour caliber golf ball, like a Pro V1, a TaylorMade TP5, or something like that. Snell makes good golf balls that are tour caliber kind of golf balls, very, very similar to a Pro V1. There's lots of options out there. Basically, any golf ball that a tour player plays is going to be a golf ball you're going to be able to spin for the most part. So take your pick, for the most part. So anything that has kind of that soft urethane cover, you're going to be able to get some pretty good spin on. The next thing is I would make sure that your club face, your high lofted club, whatever it might be, is perfectly clean, right? You can't have it can't be dirty. You can't have a bunch of stuff in the grooves. It can't be wet. It needs to be dry. You need to be able to imagine you can eat off of it. That's kind of what you need to have. And then the next piece is just making perfectly clean contact, right? So you cannot be hitting. So let's say this: if you're in the rough, the reason why you can't get a lot of spin out of the rough is because it's hard to make perfectly clean contact, or it's impossible, right? Because the rough is going to get in the way. It's going to get, when you're coming in, you're going to be getting grass and moisture between the golf ball and the face, and that's going to reduce the amount of friction and spin that you're going to be able to generate, right? So the ball's going to kind of slip on the face. It's not going to spin as much. So you want to keep in mind, out of the rough, you're not going to get that. So the lie makes a big difference. So if you want to get spin, you need to have a good clean lie where you have clean access to the back of the golf ball, where you can come in and make extremely clean contact. And that's really all it comes down to. That's as simple as it is. You can try to hit down on it a little bit more to try to get a little bit of more friction. But for the most part, if you use a good golf ball, use a tour caliber golf ball, you use a wedge with plenty of loft that you can still hit 100 yards, and that wedge is clean, and you make perfectly clean contact, that ball will spin. It will spin. And once you get to where you can do that, then you can play around with, okay, I'm going to try to hit down, lean on this a little bit more. I'm going to try and hit down on it even more to try to get a little bit more spin. But until you can get that good clean contact with kind of like a normal swing, I wouldn't worry about that at all. So Vincent L says, playing a 50-yard pitch, can we just do a short version of a full swing, or do we need to really have a different swing, different between short game and long game? Yeah, for the most part, I think because it's a shorter swing, you don't really need to have like a weight shift and like a normal swing, right? So in a normal full swing, I'm starting my swing, I'm shifting my weight into my trail side, and then I'm shifting into my lead side. I'm getting some lag here, and I'm turning through, making sure I'm getting on my lead side. But with a short kind of shot, the reason why I do that is to get some good power, right? To get some good speed and distance. I want to hit, I want to be consistent with how far I'm hitting the golf ball. But with a shorter swing, I don't need that. I don't need the weight shift. I don't need the lag, right? I don't need that as much. So what you can do to make things a little bit easier, and this is what I do on my pitch shots, is I like to set up with my feet closer together. That makes it easier to stay centered and control where you hit the ground. I like to set up with my feet a little bit open, right? What that does is it makes it easier to get through the ball, to open up the body a little bit, right? I don't need to take a full backswing. So, I don't need to have my, we wouldn't want to do that in a normal swing because it'd be hard to get the club back there very much. Right. So since it's just a kind of a half swing, I don't need to take the club back as far. Right. So I can open up my body because I don't need that power. Right. So open up my body, feet closer together. And then I just like to stay on my lead foot. I don't really move much pressure on my lead foot. I keep most of my weight on my lead foot, and then it's just turning back and through. And it's more simple when you do that. So you can absolutely do what you're saying. Take your normal stance just like you're hitting a long shot and just shorten it. But I find it easier just to narrow the stance, open the feet a little bit, stay on your lead side, and focus on making sure you make ball first contact and feeling like you're turning back and through the ball. So that'd be kind of like how you would hit, your normal kind of pitch shot. So Todd M says, do the long hitters have an effortless swing, or are they pushing the head hard through the ball? They're definitely, what you're talking about there is very relative to feel and things like that. So I can't speak for what a player feels like they're doing. But more of the times what I would say is that things look more effortless than what they really are. Right. And it's just because the quality of the movement is so good. Right. So they're not having to make any kind of crazy compensations to get the club, on plane or anything like that. They're getting the club to shallow nicely. They're sequencing properly, so things look a lot smoother. But the reality is that there is some power happening there. It's not necessarily effortless per se. But some players do. They do say they feel kind of effortless, and then some say, "Hey, I know it looks effortless, but I'm definitely pushing hard." But it's really relative. So Anthony A says, are there any drills to help develop the feel of the face to path relationship? I tend to think of it as two separate things, and I need to be better at coordinating them to work together. So I would just work on hitting draws and fades and straight shots. That's really what it is, because that's what that face to path relationship is, what puts the curvature on the ball, right? So if I'm wanting to hit a draw, I'm wanting to swing out to the right with my face closed to my path, right? If I'm wanting to hit a fade, I'm wanting to, for a right-handed golfer, I'm wanting to swing to the left with my face open to the path. So to gain control of that and to get a better feel for that, it's just hitting draws and fades. What I like to do is something that's called a shot matrix. So there's 9 shots in golf, right? You have your fades, right, which are going to be high, medium, and low trajectory fades. You have your draws, high, medium, low trajectory draws, and then you have your straight shots, which are high, medium, low trajectory straight shots. So you kind of think of it as like a tic-tac-toe board, and you're trying to hit through the windows of the tic-tac-toe board. So what I would try to do is I would get on the range, and this is actually a fun game to play. I like to do this game, and what I would do is I would make a tic-tac-toe board on like a piece of paper or something like that, and just pick one, right? So let's say I'm going to pick that right window, right? That right middle window. So that's going to be a draw, right? It's going to be a ball that if I'm going to hit it through that window, that's going to have that ball start to the right and curve back to the left. So that's going to be my medium trajectory draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to hit that shot, and I'm going to count how many attempts it takes me to hit that shot absolutely perfect the way that I want it to, the way it looks like in my mind. Right. So it can't be a little bit of a chunk. It can't be a toe strike. It has to be flushed, right? It has to be a good divot, center face strike. And the trajectory has to be middle and curving right to left, the amount that I'm kind of thinking of in my mind. So in your mind, you might be thinking, okay, it's going to be like a 10-yard draw. It has to match that, right? So I'm going to count how many repetitions it takes me, how many attempts it takes me to do that. And then however many it is, I'm going to write that down, right? And then I'm just going to go through the entire board doing the same thing. So I'll do the low draw, and you can jump around all over the place. You don't have to you can do all the draws at once or all the fades or whatever you want to do. You just got to end up filling that entire board. And what ends up happening is you're going to see what you struggle with, right? You're going to see, oh man, the draws, you can add up all those draw numbers and all the fade numbers and all the straight numbers, and you can see, okay, man, that took it took me a lot more draw attempts to do those than it took the fade attempts, right? Or you can look at the trajectory, right? See what you struggle with there, the high trajectory shots versus the low trajectory and the medium trajectory shots. And you can see, oh man, I had a lot of trouble with the low trajectory shots. And what you can do is with the rest of the time, you can work on improving those things. So that way you can get all those numbers to be smaller, the total number of reps that it took you. And you can also get things a little bit more even. So you can work the ball both ways. Now, it's completely fine to have a bias. I'm definitely more comfortable drawing the ball than fading the ball, but you need to be able to do both. Right? You need to be able to do both, even though you're not comfortable with it. But if your stock shot is a draw, that's completely fine if you do the draws a little bit better for the fades, but you don't want a huge discrepancy there, right? You want to be able to do the fades pretty well as well when you need to. So that way you can trust it when you get out in the course. So the shot matrix, I think, is a really, really good, a good thing to do. All right, we got 15 minutes or so left. So Vincent L says, when playing short pitches, 40 to 60 yards, I usually have quite big divots. Is this okay? Or should we have smaller divots the shorter we are? So a lot of it can depend on the conditions too. So if you're in really dry conditions and you're taking really deep divots, then that's probably an issue, right? But if it's really wet, plush kind of conditions, and it's really soft, then the club's just going to more easily dig into the turf. So, that's fairly normal as long as it's not excessive. But I will say, if you're taking a big divot, it means that you're probably hitting down on the ball a lot, which can help you get a lot of spin on those shots. But your margin for error can be a little bit smaller, right? So if you ever watch, there's some of the best footage out there. If you go on YouTube and watch, see if you can find Tiger Woods, like a short game, or Tiger Woods. There's like an hour, I don't know if it's an hour long, but there's a decently long video of Tiger hitting pitch shots, and he never takes a divot. Let me see. Yeah, it's about a 5-minute video. So if you just go to YouTube and search Tiger Woods pitching, and it's a video of a range session. It looks like he's preparing for the U.S. Open. It says from a few years ago, and you can see he's not disturbing the turf at all, right? So he's coming in very, very shallow and just kind of taking the ball off of the turf, right? So that's going to be, he has a much higher margin for error because he's kind of using the bounce a little bit. Whereas with what you're doing, it's a very small margin for error, and it can work just fine, but you're going to have some catastrophic misses most likely, because if you don't hit the ground in the right place, it's going to be a chunk or it's going to be a skull, right? So yeah, look at that video, and then what you want to do is really feel like you're continuing to turn through and feel like the hands are kind of working up through contact. So that lead shoulder works down and then it works up through contact. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to kind of flatten out the strike through impact. So if you're kind of coming down and you're just kind of dropping the hands behind the ball, right, that's going to be probably more like what you're doing. So I really feel like you're coming down and that lead shoulder kind of moves back up. And that way you get a nice kind of brushing of the turf when you do that. You're going to be most likely a little bit more consistent when you do that. All right, so PB says, I tend to block my drives to the right. The distance is okay, but I'm always to the right. I'm not squaring the face at contact. What should I do? Sounds like you're swinging too much out to the right? So if you're hitting blocks, so what I would define a block is for a right-handed golfer is a ball that starts to the right and keeps going to the right. It doesn't have any curvature to it. It's just a straight shot, but it's to the right. So if that is what's happening, then and it sounds like you're hitting it solid because you said you have good distance. Then that means your path is too much from the inside, and your face is in line with that path, right? So you're swinging too much from the inside, and then the club face is also in that direction. So what I would try to feel like is that you're hitting a pull. I would try to feel like you're actually coming over the top, and I'd try to pull it to the left and see if that helps get rid of those. It's hard to say without seeing your swing what the actual, kind of root cause of what's going on, but that's what I would try to feel. I'd try to feel like you're coming over the top, you're swinging to the left through contact, assuming you're right-handed, and you said blocks out to the right. Yeah, so yeah, try to feel like you're hitting a pull to the left, and that should help. So Paul B says, on a short to mid chipping stroke, should it be straight and then it cut off? And then it says, Q, I'm 75 currently, driver swing speed in the mid 90s. I've broken my shaft. It's stiff. Would you recommend replacing the same shaft, or should I be looking at something softer because of my age? If you want to know what shaft is right for you, you got to go get fitted. Unfortunately, there's just no way I can know what shaft you need just based on that information. I would need to. So what I'd recommend doing, if you want to know if the shaft works well for you, is go somewhere, get fitted, and then they can show you, hey, this shaft is better for you, right? Because it helps you hit the ball farther, helps you hit it more accurately, it gets you more speed, and so on and so forth. So, like I said, otherwise you're just guessing. Meyer Burry says, hi Q, can you explain the correlation between the smash factor and club head speed? I see some people hitting 200 yards at 85 miles per hour while others hitting 200 at 95 miles per hour. Why is that? That's because of the contact. So what the smash factor is, it's the ball speed over the club head speed, right? So it's essentially the efficiency of the strike. So typically a good smash factor for driver is going to be about 1.5. So if you swing 100 miles per hour, your ball speed, a really good ball speed, would be 150 miles per hour. If your smash factor is well below that, then your ball speed goes down and your distance goes down, right? So if you're swinging 85, if you're hitting at 200 yards at 85 miles per hour, that's probably pretty good. That'd be a pretty solid smash factor, I think. Typically, you're going to get about 2.6 yards for every mile per hour. Obviously, conditions make a big difference, where you live, elevation, all that stuff. But generally, 2.6 for every miles per hour. So if you take 85 times 2.6, it's about 221, right? So that would be, a fairly solid drive. If you're hitting at 200 with 95 mile per hour club head speed, you are definitely not hitting it solid. At 95 miles per hour, you should be hitting close to 250. So 247 is what 2.6 times 95 is. So, if you're not hitting it, if you're hitting at 200 yards with 95 mile per hour club head speed, it means you're most likely not hitting the ball in the center of the club face. You're probably hitting it on the toe or on the heel or something like that. And or you're chopping down on the ball, right? So you're hitting down on it and not getting the ball up in the air, getting a lot of spin on the ball, which will make it go shorter, and or you're cutting across it, right? So you're hitting a big slice, a big hook, and the ball's not going anywhere. So people who are swinging 95 miles per hour need to be hitting it well over 200 yards. So 85 mile per hour. If you're getting 200 carry on an 85 mile per hour swing, that's pretty solid. You're probably hitting it pretty solid. So Steve says, I'm having a really tough time trying to clear lead hip and stop humping. Do you have a couple drills that you can help with this? Can I tie my hips to a wall behind me or something? So you have to look at what the root cause is to why you're not opening up the hips. It's very likely that you're physically capable of opening up your hips. It's just that because of how the club is coming down or how you're squaring up the face or for other root cause reasons, that you're not opening up the hips. So you're more than likely not opening up the hips so that way you can hit a functional golf shot, right? And the way that you can kind of test this is what you can do is go out to the range. And what I want you to do, assuming you're right-handed, I want you to put this ball kind of on your lead foot. And I want you to set up to it with, set up to a target there and put the ball more toward your lead foot, like where you would line up your driver. And what I want you to do is I want you to hit this ball as far to the left as you possibly can, right? So really, really try to swing as far to the left as you possibly can. And I would almost, most of the time, I would almost guarantee that your hips will be open at impact, or way more open than they are now, right? So you may look like this right now, but when you go like that, well, now look, the hips are opened up. And the reason is because of what you're trying to do with that shot, right? You're trying to hit a pull way to the left, right? So if you come into contact and your hips are like this, then you have a physical limitation that you're not able to open up your hips, right? So I would look at, I would either just come to terms with that, or I would look at working with maybe a physical therapist or a trainer or something like that to work on your flexibility or your strength. You may have really weak glutes. You may have, just be not flexible or whatever. It's a strength issue, or it's a flexibility issue, right? And that's going to take a lot of hard work and dedication just to do that. So you kind of have to look at your ROI on that. What's your return on investment? The time that you're going to invest into getting your hips open. What is that really going to do for your golf game? You can play great golf without having your hips open, right? So, you don't have to have the hips open. It doesn't make it easier to get shaft lean and release the club out in front. Absolutely. But that is not a requirement to play good golf. All right. So, but yeah, check that out. Now, if you look on video and you say, hey, when I try to yank this ball way to the left, hit as far to the left as I possibly can, right? If I just let myself do that, hey, my hips open up. Well, if that is the case, then you don't have a physical limitation. You're not opening up your hips because of how this club is coming down, right? And or the club face, where the club face is pointing, right? So if the face is open and you use an early release to square up the face, well, you cannot open up your hips when you do that, because you have to early extend and move the hips forward to make room for the club, right? If I were to stay in my posture, right, and rotate my hips and then early release the club, well, I would throw the club into the ground 3 feet behind the golf ball. And your brain is not going to allow you to do that. It's going to say stand up and flip, right? Or let's say you're coming down steep, right? You're coming down steep over the top. Well, if I stayed in my posture and really opened up my hips, I would hit that big yank shot way to the left, right? So I have to get this club more behind me and shallowing out to be able to do that, right? It could be something in your setup. So I wish I could just say, hey, go work on this drill. You're going to start opening up the hips, right? Basically, what I can tell you is put the ball forward in your stand. If you just want to open up your hips and see if you can, put the ball way forward in your stance and try to hit the biggest yank pull you possibly can. And boom, your hips are open. But that's not a very good shot now, is it? Right? So you have to look at, well, how the heck how do I get my hips open, but I also hit a good shot? Well, you got to get the club shallowing out. You got to get the face squaring up earlier. And that's the move course. There's other things. You got to have your spine angles correct, right? So basically, the drills that you need to do to get your hips open are the top speed golf system and the move. That's what you got to do. And maybe the stop early extension course. There's some good drills in there. That's what you got to do to get the hips open. Or if you're physically not capable of doing it, it may be more physical therapy or something like that, which personally would not, for me, it definitely would not be worth it. All right, so let me get one more question here from PH. So PH says, Q, I have a consistent draw shot with my irons and can hit that shot 90% of the time with no issues with an in to out path. The driver, on the other hand, I always tend to fade and struggle with a draw. For whatever reason, I keep hitting the driver with a slight out to in path. Have you seen this with any other students? And is there something I can work on? I feel that I'm coming in fairly shallow with the driver. You're just not coming in shallow enough. So you have to shallow out the driver more because the ball is more forward in your stance, right? So if I kind of use this, the hula hoop again, she doesn't love the hula hoop. But if I use the hula hoop example again, my club is coming down on an arc, right? So if there's my ball position for an iron, right? That would be my club is swinging in to out, right? But for a driver, my ball position is more up here. Now look, the club is working more to the left when it gets to the ball, right? So I have to get my path more shallowed out and more into out in order to do that. So you just got to shallow it out more. You just got to feel like you're swinging more into out with a closed face with the driver to get it to draw because of the ball position. I mean, the other option is to kind of put the ball position in a similar position, but then you're going to be hitting down on it, hitting low, hooky kind of shots, which wouldn't be good either. We want to have the ball up in the stance so that way we can hit up on it, a higher launch, low spin, more distance, right? We just need to swing more into out with the driver because of where the ball is in the stance, because it is more forward. So that's very common. You just need to feel like you're shallowing it out a lot more. So get wider, get more angled away, and feel like you're swinging much more out to the right with the driver. Let that face roll over, get that ball to start drawing. All right, thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time, same time. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time.